Today we are reading from Alan Watts' the book on the taboo against knowing who you are. We've started this video a few times and something has happened and erupted. So let's see if we can make it happen today. Alan has some real wisdom here. This is about really making life into a game. And a lot of serious things have been happening lately, even in our world. And so I feel like there's just, so Abraham and Esther Hicks are always talking about how there's nothing serious going on here and this should be more lighthearted, but sometimes with the level of seriousness of things we see, we don't get why. And I think Alan has such a beautiful way of sort of scientifically and spiritually and logically leading us through why it should just be a game. And so we'll start.
He summarizes that really well with, like this deep introspective thing. His title is literally, So What?
That's the title of his chapter. So what?
Okay.
So I love his ability to be, so serious and deep dive, and then so superficial and playful. Like, it's very fashionable these days for people to say that they're reincarnated versions of something epic, right? And then people will listen to me because I'm so if I were going to claim to be reincarnated anything, it would be Alan Watts. I'll just say that. Start saying that. Maybe I'll write his son, Mark, I just know it. St. Thomas came to me, or, some St. Germain and told me that I was the reincarnation of Alan Watts. Wouldn't that be nice? But for now, I'm just going to study him. And the interesting thing I'll add about that is I think if you really connect to someone's reading, you can tap into their consciousness. I mean, I think that's what Esther's doing with Abraham is like this stream of consciousness. You probably can connect with their ideas and passions and thought systems since we are spiritual in nature. It doesn't mean you're the reincarnated version of them.
I think it's just because you always put a little bit of yourself in all of your work.
Of course.
Like, because you put that personal stamp on the things that you do, like literally your energy, your spirit, whatever you want to call it, everything that you put your effort into has part of your effort in it.
Of course. I get that.
So this book, he wrote, if it resonates with you, there's a little bit of Alan Watts now sandbagging along to you.
I think so, but I also think when we die, we're still playing the game. We just don't have a physical form. So I think when you're tapping into and connecting with someone's work, you're connecting with them. Like probably if you're reading a lot of Wayne Dyer, like you'll start to feel more of his energy and space because he's literally working with you.
Live on through your works.
Well, we're more non-physical than physical. That's the thing. We're more spiritual than we are physical beings. And so we think we're physical and they're now some other mechanism.
Separate.
And we don't realize that we're all vibration. It's simply just our senses that are translating things as being physical. We know that they're not. So they're just a different version of vibrational than we are. So why would there be any separation? It's just the perception of being physical that we think creates separation.
It's easier for you to connect with it because it is physical and you're using your physical apparatus.
Right. And then this is a physical apparatus. Yes. And this has his vibration in it, to your point, and his personality. So
just faster.
Should we have this long of an intro on the reading?
Yeah.
All right. So much to say. Always trying to keep it short. Yeah, I'm always trying to keep it shorter, and then I just blab on. I don't know. Is that Alan?
You know what? Put it in the comment section. If you feel these should be shorter, let us know. We'll just slice it out.
Actually, a few people have commented the length is fine.
Yeah,
that was when it was close. But that's also when I was doing mashup readings from different sources. And I don't mind doing a variety. Sometimes longer, sometimes shorter. I just feel like they've all been long lately. So.
You have more to say.
Who has that kind of time?
Again, you don't have to sit down and watch things in one go. The video doesn't disappear. It's right here. Forever, actually.
Forever. For better or worse.
It's on the internet. It's there forever.
Fair enough. So what? It comes to this then, that to be viable, livable, or merely practical, life must be lived as a game. And the must here expresses a condition, not a commandment. It must be lived in the spirit of play rather than work. And isn't this exciting that things don't have to be taken as seriously? Now, there's different aspects to that, obviously, when we talk about the spiritual, physical levels. But what's interesting here with him is he's not saying that, it's all lighthearted and fun. He's saying that in order to do life effectively, actually, this is the attitude that must be taken. And I find that such an interesting take because sometimes, like I said, when Abraham's like, nothing serious is going on here, that can be really difficult to understand when we're watching things like Israel and Gaza play out in the news, or Ukraine and Russia. Obviously, it feels like very many serious things are happening to people.
Or personal death in a family, like very serious things happening.
PTSD and trauma. Yeah, we've had some various serious things going on. So to say it's a game can feel like we're devaluing our own feelings, and that isn't the come from. Here, it's really to be like, if we really want to do life well. So he'll explain more why, right? So the conflicts which life involves must be carried on in the realization that no species or party to a game can survive without its natural antagonists, its beloved enemies, its indispensable opponents. For to love your enemies is to love them as enemies. It is not necessarily a clever device for winning them over to your own side, as we always think of the biblical interpretation is often love your enemies as yourself, meaning like sort of bring them over to you. But it's the realization that we need enemies because it helps define who we are. America is defined by its conflicts it's had with other countries. Yeah. You brought that up before, right? World War II.
Yeah, that's pretty much where we express to the world what we stand for. And everyone still thinks of us as World War II America. Bold, loud, stands up for what's right, will always be the first one to stand for what they believe is right. That's not necessarily true. Or it is, but either way, we identified ourselves in contrast to what was happening and to the rise of the Nazi Party.
Well, everybody, when they sit down, right? You sit down with your family, right? Do you sit down with the cool parts of your family and then you can talk about how the other parts of your family suck, right? We define ourselves by the contrast of how others are being, right? I'm cool because I have tattoos and you're just a square, don't get it. Yeah. And they sit over there and think, I don't have tattoos, so I'm getting into heaven. And, you can't even get through the pearly gates because you have them. Like, we're all dividing ourselves up into these little groups and defining ourselves. And so through that, our enemies do help to define who we are, like you're saying. So then you'd say, well, they're part of our identity. So you can't just say that they're all bad or our goodness couldn't exist without that contrast. But it gets really interesting
because
because
them for the contrast to define you.
You love them in that aspect of them helping to define the goodness in you. The interesting thing here, though, I'll just add, which is a total tangent, but it was easy in the definition of the Nazis and Hitler, right? And we were standing for the side of good. That piece of that identity of someone who stands for Israel and the Jewish people is now carrying over into the Israel-Gaza conflict, but it's not as clean.
No.
And now people are saying, wait, there's also bad happening on their side and oppressing Palestinians. And so you're getting into a really interesting thing. It's not as clean of a definition of our identity. And I think America's really struggling to say, how do we stand for the good in both situations when they're in conflict with each other and they're both doing bad things?
Yeah.
And that gets really tricky because you're trying to stand for the innocent, and innocents are being hurt on both sides.
Yeah.
It's not just an oppressor.
No, it's most conflicts of definition are gray areas, but some people like to make it an extreme black or white.
They do. Even my grandma, who was a German, raised in Germany.
In Nazi youth.
In Nazi youth would always talk about all the innocent Germans who died. I mean, our family, all the men in our family were wiped out because they went to go fight for Hitler. Of course, they were like 16 at the time. They had no choice. The country was starving until he showed up. So from her perspective, it was very different and always interesting to learn about. Obviously, I did not align with her personal perspective, but it was interesting to hear because it's still a perspective of someone's life who suffered a lot through it. So it says, the lion lays down with the lamb in paradise, but not on earth. Paradise being the tacit offstage level where behind the scenes, all conflicting parties recognize their interdependence. So in other words, we're all playing on the same team from the spirit side that we were kind of referencing from before, right? No matter who dies and what role they were playing on earth and in the physical, they pass and play on the same team in the spiritual. It's just for the purposes of this game, we take different sides.
Like you play a different character the next time you play through.
Right,
Like,
you pick the other
I think
side.
I'm going to go a good character this time. I'm going to be a villain this time.
I'm going to be a man. I'm going to be a woman.
Yep.
I'm going to be this color. I'm going to be
join
that
this
color.
faction when
I'm
I
going to
go
be
through.
rich. I'm going to be poor. Right.
Yeah, I want to see that storyline now.
Right. So, And through this recognition, all parties are able to keep their conflicts within bounds. This is also the key to forgiveness, is to realize that people who have hurt you are actually supporting you, because until you experience the pain or the contrast of going through something, you can't ask for what you really want and really define what you really want. So even those who hurt us are helping us, or are on our team on the other side, helping us to define who we are and what we want. This recognition is the absolutely essential chivalry which must set the limits on all warfare with human and non-human enemies alike.
Ooh, to that point, I will remind everyone that chivalry is literally a code of conduct. It is not an actual principle of anything else. It is merely how to conduct yourself in response. It is not like, oh, you're so chivalrous. No, I am required to respond per this circumstance. So when he uses the term chivalry.
For chivalry is the debonair spirit of the knight who plays with his
Yes.
life in the knowledge that even mortal combat is a game.
Yes, it is your conduct of that combat. And that he's also saying, I believe, using that term in relation to, this is just merely a response to the thing. They're not, I don't personally have a problem with those. And it's just, they're showing me something and I'm responding because of the chivalry that is this response for the situation.
Well, and he's saying recognition is the absolutely essential chivalry, which must set the limits.
The essential conduct.
Right. And understanding that at the end of the day, we're all helping each other and there really are no fully bad or fully good entities. It's just part of the game, and we're each taking on a role for the purposes of the game. No one who has been hoaxed into the belief that he is nothing but his ego, or nothing but his individual organism, that's the mechanistic view, saying like we're just, what does he say, a cell-infested skeleton. That's such a great way to put it.
Also liked the flesh puppet.
Yes, the flesh puppet, yeah. So
The
I'm
meat
just...
mech.
Yeah, oh my God. Well, yeah, just that there's nothing to us. Like, here consciousness is the true magic of everything, and we think it's being scientific or logical to degrade it into being an unconscious, sort of just mechanistic, robotic machine, which makes absolutely no sense. You don't have things that go from being simple to complex just because you give them enough time. And you don't have things that have the depth of experience and consciousness and magic and things that are happening here with consciousness imbued everything that we have. If it's just like a robotic mechanism, it just wouldn't be happening here. And then you think that that's just being a realist.
I'm just saying.
You're taking all the magic out. It's completely illogical, but that's not what this video. We'll get to that in another video, right? So no one who's been hoaxed in the belief that he has nothing but his ego or nothing but his individual organism can be chivalrous, let alone a civilized, sensitive, and intelligent member of the cosmos. So if you're just a robot, you can't be a civilized, sensitive, and intelligent member of the cosmos, and yet you are. So that's where the conflict. I've met some folks who were atheists who were such good people working so hard to contribute to the greater good. And I would be like, but why? If this is all coming from nowhere and going nowhere, don't you question how you have such a sense of goodness and purpose? If you're just a robot, why would you care about the overall greater good? That wouldn't be built into you unless there was some kind of overall greater good or purpose here that you were pre-designed with.
Which is what I would say is that code of conduct.
Yes.
There's something in you that is already there.
Which gets to our earlier conversation, which is also not for this video, this idea that God is required to create right and wrong, that you have no right and wrong, and it's just moral relativism without this idea of a judge God or a monarch God in the West. But that is not true, and that's where your Eastern religions and Alan would always flow in. Like, the idea that you're created good is much better. For humans, we do have an internal code of conduct. We do have a sense of right and wrong and good that is totally separate from our God assigning it to us. We do not require it from an external source. It's when we're told that there's an external source that we are not aligning with that we become in conflict with our internal nature. And then we begin to question ourselves and search for an identity somewhere. And that's where we can get attached to things that are wrong and they can feel good because we aren't listening to our true self. We've been separated from that. Okay, but to be lived this way, the life game has to be purged of self-contradictory rules. So this is going to get into the double bind. This, and not some kind of moral effort, is the way out of the hoax of separateness. Okay, I guess he is getting into what I was just talking about. Thus, when a game sets the players an impossible and not simply difficult task, it comes quickly to the point where it's no longer worth playing if it's too complex and you're set up to fail. And I feel that way at work. Like, if I feel like I'm set up to fail at work, there's no reason to play the game. Why would I bother trying? There is no way of observing a rule set in the form of a double bind, that is, a two-part rule whose parts are mutually exclusive. An example of a double bind here is the perfect one. No one can be compelled to behave freely or forced to act independently. That's the most difficult double bind of our society, is that you are supposed to voluntarily act the way other people want you to act.
Yeah.
But do it voluntarily, right? Do what I say, go to bed when I want, eat what you should. It's all written in there.
Good kids do this. You know, a good employee would just volunteer to overwork.
Exactly. We're asking people to conform while claiming they should never conform and should be completely independent. It's a very fascinating, and he has really shined a spotlight on that for me. I knew there was something wrong. I just couldn't quite figure it out, especially parents who are especially controlling, but then want their kids to never listen to anyone else, right? So never go out and be part of society, but listen to everything I tell you.
And also
never
be a
question it.
free-thinking, you're so smart and so everything. You're not doing what I told you.
And parents that are so controlling
Yes.
are so mystified when their kids go out into the world and then listen to everyone else around them and don't have a sense of personal identity just because you took it from them at a young age and told them how they were supposed to think. So it's a fascinating thing. So yet whole cultures and civilizations have befuddled themselves with this kind of nonsense. And through failing to spot the self-contradiction, their members have been haunted all through their lives by the sense that individual existence is a problem and a predicament, a form of nature doomed to perpetual frustration.
That's actually, that exact scenario is where kind of the stereotypical joke about therapy. So tell me about your parents. It's because of that. That's probably is where that story, where like, I have a conflict with myself because of double binds.
Because of double binds. And the women, we blame our parents, but our parents were put through the same
They
thing.
also were in double binds.
They just buy into it wholly. And I think a lot of us these days are trying to wake up to that and say, wait a minute, you're sending me a mixed message that I can't be successful at. So when I know that on some type of spiritual level, but not intellectually, and I don't really know what's going on, what do? I start drinking. I start doing other things where it's like, well, I'm just going to give up because I'm set up to fail. Or I'm just going to...
I'll just numb that.
I'm going to check out... I'm going to numb it. I'm going to check out a society completely. Maybe I'll go shoot some people.
Yep. Or I'll just go find something that does correlate with my double bind, which is usually either some type of special group,
organized religion,
or some special group, whatever it might be. You will find some group that is also trying to express that frustration, instead of finding it yourself and then being happy with yourself because you found it yourself. You will go find someone to tell you how to do it.
Well, and to your point, why diversity and equity and equality become more about revenge than about actually being equal. And that's why the pendulum continues to swing and we continue to see the same energetic patterns exist rather than actually establishing
The oppressed
equality.
become the tyrant.
The oppressed becomes the oppressor. We continue to become what we claim to despise because we don't realize the energy is the same because of these double binds. The sense of ego is at root a discomfort and a bore, and nothing shows it more clearly than everyday phrases such as, I need to get away from myself, or you should find something to take you out of yourself, or I read to forget myself. These days it would be, I watch TV and play video games so I don't have to be myself.
Or if you're in Colorado, other things.
So funny he's talking about what we just said. We hadn't read this, so we didn't know this was coming.
I definitely have not read this.
You've not read it. Get lost, it says, hence the fanaticisms and intoxications, religious, political, and sexual, the Nazis, the Klan, Hell's Angels, the Circus Maximus, the dreary fascination of the TV screen, witch burnings, Mickey Spillane and James Bond, pachinko parlors, alcoholic stupors, revivals, isn't it funny, alcoholic stupors and revivals are the same thing, tabloid newspapers and juvenile gangs, all of which, as things stand, are the necessary safety values and palliatives for human beings whose very existence is defined in self-contradictory and self-defeating terms. Finally, the game of life as Western man has been playing it for the past century needs less emphasis on practicality, results, progression, and aggression. Progress and aggression, actually. This is why I am discussing vision and keeping off of the subject of justifying the vision in terms of its practical applications and consequences. Whatever may be true for the Chinese and the Hindus, it is timely for us to recognize that the future is an ever-retreating mirage, and to switch our immense energy and technical skill to contemplation instead of action. However much we may now disagree with Aristotle's logic and his metaphors, he must still be respected for reminding us that the goal of action is always contemplation, knowing and being rather than seeking and becoming. And the fascinating thing here is that's what Abraham talks about all the time. We are so focused on action, but it needs to be more about how we're being and what we're knowing, and then the action will follow. They call it plugging in their vacuum. And I find it fascinating that Alan Watts gets to the same place, where it's about, we are so focused on seeking and becoming, myself included, the destination that's never going to show up, rather than knowing and being. And when you get into the conversation that you are creating your reality, which he doesn't get into as much, but is so close to, knowing and being are what actually create reality. The action will come, but it is so secondary and so much less important than the knowing and the being. And we are trying to find the proper knowing and being through the action and the seeking.
I was about to say, so knowing and being makes everything else seem seamless and just inherent. Like if you are like when you're happy and you go and do something, you don't even notice that it went flawlessly.
I know.
If you're like, okay, all I need to do is put this together, like, you're literally going to hit a wall because you're trying to act without actually having any function.
Well, it's the vibration, right?
Yeah.
We don't realize it's all vibrational. And if I'm attracting based on my vibration, when I'm in a bad space, all I can attract is bad. And when I'm in a good space and just believing everything's going to work out, like you said, you barely even notice.
Yep.
It just does.
Like if you're frustrated and you're trying to find something, you might walk past it like 8 times. You're like, I'm just going to stop looking for it, go do something else, come back, and I'm like, oh, there it is.
It shows up.
Right there.
Well, it's even like your day yesterday. I'm sorry to bring it up, but it's a very extreme circumstance. But you were so upset and scared on the road because of the accident you just had.
Yeah.
And what are you surrounded by? Accidents on the road.
Yep.
And that's what he was seeing, because when we're so afraid, that's your vibrational space. That's what you're attracting, where you might never see an accident on the road. But if you're worried about an accident, you'll see several.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you'll see what you want. The same way it's like cherry picking from something. Like, all I see everywhere in here is like, that's like 2 lines.
Mm-hmm. Well, because that's what we're focused on, and we only see what it is that we are, because it's our own dream that we're creating based on vibration.
What you want, you'll find it.
Mm-hmm. Remember, we're just interpreting the physical with our senses. So we have come to even a scientific place to realize everything's vibrational. That means it's much less solid than we think, and our mental state and beliefs are what create what we see and experience.
The only thing that keeps my finger from merging into this finger is a very small magnetic field of vibration.
They really are
that
melting.
Prevents me from going into the other one. And that's also fun.
But we think it's a physical barrier, but
Nope,
it's not.
It's not. This will just be gelatinous things.
But
It's
you
just
say
a
it's an
magnetic-
electronic, but I think the magnetic barrier is probably established because you think you're separate, because it would really freak you out to see them go together.
There,
So we
girl.
believe we're solid.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it probably could totally melt together. You probably can walk through walls. As it is, we are merely bolting our lives, gulping down undigested experiences as fast as we can stuff them in. And this is the 70s he wrote this. Think about this now, how busy we are, how we are running from one experience to another. We don't even have time to process our jobs, our lives, our kids, our anything that's happening, because so much is happening, and they're all, just like he says, undigested experiences. Because awareness of our existence is so superficial and so narrow that nothing seems to us more boring than simple being.
Because again, we're not
How sad
taking
is
that
that?
time to contemplate.
How sad
We're
is
just
that?
acting. Yeah, getting those results.
But think of how even kids we know today, like, they're bored instantly. If they don't have an app, if they're not listening to something, so many people just can't be. They find it boring to be with themselves, and your own mind is reality. But we think we're so lost in the physical stimulation.
There's also those people that just can't sit still with other people either. They have to be doing something, like in
Talking
relationships.
or engaging.
If we're not actively doing something, the relationship breaks and falters. You can't actually just sit next to somebody and enjoy being
Oh my gosh,
around
so
them.
many people. I don't mind sitting in silence with people, but I find it intriguing when I'm with people who get really agitated sitting in silence.
Yeah. Silence.
If I ask you what you did, saw, heard, smelled, touched, and tasted yesterday, I'm likely to get nothing more than the thin, sketchy outline of the few things that you noticed. And of those, only what you thought worth remembering.
Yeah.
It is surprising that an existence so experienced seems so empty and bare, that its hunger for an infinite future is insatiable. Let's say that again. It is surprising that in an existence so experienced, meaning so superficially experienced and barely worth remembering, seems so empty and bare that its hunger for an infinite future is insatiable. Right. We consider our now and our lives so empty and bare. I want the money, I want the fancy, I want whatever's in the future. So we find our current existence so empty and bare and boring but we have an insatiable hunger for this magical future we've decided that's going to come and is a mirage. But if we're not enjoying our present, how will that be? But suppose you could answer, it would take me forever to tell you, and I am much too interested in what's happening now. Okay, so what was it? His question, if I ask you what you did, saw, heard, smelled, and touched and tasted yesterday, what if you answered, it would take me forever to tell you, and I'm much too interested in what's happening now? This is deep stuff. In other words, he's saying, if you were so enthralled with your life because it was so amazing, but you couldn't even talk about it because you're so happy with what's happening right now.
There's so much to express to you from what I was processing, instead of things that happen all the time.
We're so future focused. I don't think about that. Like if you're thinking about cleaning your bathroom, you just want to get it done. You're not really focusing on the beauty of the experience in this moment. We just want to get through things. To where? Where are we going? How is it possible?
Racing to red lights.
Right. How is it possible that a being with such sensitive jewels as the eyes, such enchanted musical instruments as the ears, and such a fabulous arabesque of nerves as the brain can experience itself as anything less than a god? And when you consider that this incalculably, that's how you say that, incalculably subtle organism is inseparable from the still more marvelous patterns of its environment, from the minutest electrical designs to the whole company of the galaxies, how is it conceivable that this incarnation of all eternity can be bored with its being? That is like a smack in the face. It is such a good question. How?
I mean, you can look at a little kid too. They're fascinated by everything. Like, ooh, and they can do like the same thing the next day and they're still fascinated. They haven't had what you would consider, well, that's just every day. Why are you even excited by that? But a little 2-year-old.
Oh, they love
it's
everything.
Just like everything is fascinating.
That's how it should be. And that's why Jesus or any spiritual mechanism was saying, like, you want to get back to the mind of a child because they're so absorbed in the present and what's happening.
Is amazing.
And I love this. Or they're fully invested in it being horrible, right? I'm going to scream at the top of my lungs,
This is the worst thing ever.
But they're fully present in each moment.
They are 100% in what I'm doing right now. They don't know about later. We just got done doing that, but I wanted to do it now.
Right. But we're so even in the moment, like thinking about 50 million other things in the future and the past that we're not even noticing. We're not even noticing what's going on. And it's such a good question to say, like, oh my gosh, we take for granted the incredible mechanism of our eyes, our brains, our ears, the beauty that's around us in every moment, and focus on problems across the pond or in other places of the world and all these things we're not even a part of.
Nope.
That don't even impact our daily lives. And as such are sucking the joy and
or an alert on your phone.
Seriously disrupting the vibrations of our present and our ability to see that we are creating and calling forth everything that we're living. And that's deep. It's a bummer. It's, Alan Watts talks a lot about how everything is a spontaneous process. I've been thinking about that more and more, even when I drive. Like, we think there's space between us and another car, but really there isn't. There's all kinds of stuff in the space. It just looks like space. So actually, everything that's happening, every car, everything that's around us, like, we're all happening at once. And we're actually all connected. There isn't space. It's an entire, like, impulse of things that's happening. And I've been feeling so much more connected to everything rather than it being that person, that car, this space, that
Part. We're all a part of the whole.
Well, and we think we're apart, which is funny.
Yes.
We think we're separate and an independent agent. So the hilarious thing about the double bind is we're an independent agent, have nothing to do with anything else. And yet we're told that we have to conform and be a part of. But the truth is we are a part of. There really is no independent. Yes, it's kind of like a computer on the internet. You might have your own little computer, but you're still connected to this overall network. And you're impacted by the overall network. And you move and pulse with the overall network to an extent. And that's where it's one God that's living as all these different things, but yet the God and source is moving as an entirety and looking out through our eyes, not in a judgmental sense.
No.
That's why God became so oppressive, was because we thought he was judging everything we do.
Like, why are you judging everything everyone else does?
Well, and then we're judging everything we do,
We
and
projected
everything
a lot
else.
of negative things and moved it up to leave it off from ourselves. Like,
It's
I'm
God.
not being negative.
God taught me.
There
to
is
do
an
this way.
entity that is saying it's bad, and I'm merely implementing it and enforcing it and reminding of you every day.
Right. And the actual truth is, God is simply our source, or whatever you want to call it, looking out through our eyes and loving this experience and not judging any of it. When you take out the judgment, it's not oppressive.
Wants you to be here.
There's this, and when the more you think about the fact that you never see your own head, and that's really confusing for us because we have cameras and we have mirrors
and water.
But the reality is, when you're
reflections.
walking around, you never see
Nope.
your own head. You do not exist here to you. You're always looking out, and that's what Source is doing. It's looking out on everything from a million different perspectives.
Technically, you should never be negative about yourself because you're never actually looking at it.
Isn't that funny?
It's someone else that told you. And you're like, really? Huh? I usually used to make the joke of, if you met you, would you like yourself?
I don't know.
I
Right.
think so.
Hmm?
Do you think you'd like you if you met yourself?
I think I would now, yeah. But there were many times I did not think that. I did not think that
Yeah.
I would have liked myself for a big portion of my life. Now, yeah, I do. But I was actually thinking about, even when I started this channel a few months ago, and the videos I was making, or the video I made before I made this channel, and what started it actually, which I haven't posted. I guess I should post it, but
The very first one is not posted.
well, the one that kicked it off about happiness being the most important thing, and why I was thinking that, but then realizing how much I've shifted just in these few months of my beingness and understanding and connectedness. And that's an incredible shift, being able to step back into that mind and where I was at and my mind now in just a matter of a few months. But a big piece of that is breaking down those walls of how you're being perceived by other people, and realizing how much of it we're creating ourselves and becoming a much more expressed person. The reality is, lately, I'm not the biggest fan, or some people are not my biggest fan, because I'm expressing myself in a whole different way.
Yeah.
But I'm also, the level of power I'm playing with is a whole different level, because I can speak what I feel and what I see and not be so self-conscious about what other people think and how it's being received, because what matters to me is speaking my truth. And so many of us are so locked up in an inability to speak our truth that we have no power, because we're still stuck in that I must conform, but yet I'm independent, double bind. It's a really sad, and now I'm realizing how much that locked me up inside. Well, I'm supposed to speak my truth, and I'm supposed to share my perspective and be what I am, but I'm also supposed to not upset anyone
Yeah,
ever.
don't upset anyone, though.
Ever.
Do it quietly.
Or do it in a way that's palatable to
Yeah.
everyone, which is the most absurd idea in the world. And you can't speak your truth if you're worried about how it's going to be received. It just doesn't go together. Either you have to just, be a fake person who's constantly speaking from a place of not wanting to be perceived any way that's negatively, or you speak your truth.
Which, by the way, puts yourself in a double bind, and you won't be happy because you're not expressing yourself.
Well, that's where most people are, exactly.
Yep. And you're like, why do I feel unhappy? Probably because you're not expressing
yourself. And
you're just putting yourself in a twist.
And you don't require an environment where you can. And
No.
so you're constantly biting your own tongue. That's what causes cancer and anxiety, is just swallowing your emotions and swallowing your emotions. I mean, I think you've done a lot of that. And I think that's what you're experiencing now, is sort of that beginning to break out process.
Yeah.
And it's really uncomfortable because there's a lot of things that have been stuffed down. And when you start to sort of take that cork out, a lot comes out. But it's also the first phase that is so key to become a fully expressed person. This video got a lot longer.
Thanks for listening again.
Thank you for listening. As I get embarrassed about how it's going to be received, as I'm talking about, don't worry.
It's a process.
About how it's going to be received.
Right? That's basically the message, is it's a process.
It's a problem. It's happening, and I feel the shift in the process.
Yeah.
And so, but yeah, you don't make quantum leaps. It's one tiny micro shift
And it's
at a
not
time.
just one conversation.
It's many.
Very few things are changed by a single conversation. You have to stop and contemplate and think about what you just took in.
Right.
We just read about.
Well, because you're
People
talking
are
about
skipping
shifting
that
your beliefs.
That third part.
Well, it's our deep embedded beliefs, and these things have become a part of us. Just because you realize there's a double bind doesn't mean it takes you out of the double bind. These things have been written in on us from the time we were young, our deep beliefs. So even if I want to change my beliefs, or I can logically realize it's wrong, it takes a while before you really get in and change your beliefs, which would lead into this next reading that I'll just throw in from Abraham super quick, just one paragraph that says you have a personal emotional guidance system. It says your personal emotional guidance system operates in a similar way to an electronic guidance system. You cannot receive guidance outside of the roots or beliefs contained within your system. Your emotional guidance system of relativity is based only upon your active vibrations or beliefs and their relationship with your desired destination. Remember, a belief is really only a thought that you keep thinking. So we can't receive the information or desires or things that we want outside of what we currently believe to be possible. So our emotional guidance system or Holy Spirit has to always work with where we're at and what we believe. It can't get to openings we don't have. You have to begin to open those pathways and then begin to walk the path of being open to another way of thinking and being and believing, and then it can expand. It's like an electrical impulse.
You can only let things in that are of a similar wavelength to what you're currently at. Like
Micro shifts.
Yes. Just need a bigger
open-mindedness.
Wavelength. You're like, I don't know why I'm not getting anything in here.
Yeah, you're closed-minded people, and you'll see that. Closed-minded people are constantly taking in information that affirms where they're at and what they believe. They're never going to be more open because they're not open to it. And God or Source is never going to force you. It's always your own personal choice. You have full power, and so you have to want to change. You have to want something different to really allow it in. And a lot of people are miserable and claim they want to change, but they really don't, because they're unwilling to start to think in a new way. And this got longer. Thank you for being here. Appreciate you. You're amazing. We love you. We hope that this somehow offers a stimulation in you like it does in us.
Add some more contemplation to your day.
Have a blessed one.